there's been another update yet again when it comes to Zebec. Nothing I say is financial advice. However, very recently, something called Shadow, which allegedly what Shadow is doing, right? They're trying to build privacy infrastructure on Solana, but actually they announced how they will power Zebec Card's infrastructure through their privacy layer, embedding post-quantum security into the transaction aspect side of things, which I find pretty cool because Shadow isn't necessarily the most popular thing out there, but I find it pretty interesting that, they're even caring about this type of stuff. And also on top of that, how seriously Zebec seems to be treating the Zebec cards, because a lot of people thought it wasn't really being treated seriously. And I think privacy just overall, as of right now, we're seeing a lot of projects out there kind of focus on that. So it seems to be kind of a big narrative as of late. And just to give an example, let's take a look at Cody. Cody, it's spelled COTI, but remember quite a while back ago, it was focused on payments, but then eventually the project shifted to become a privacy-focused Ethereum layer 2. And again, we see some projects like that having that emphasis when it comes to privacy. So when I take a look at something like this, I find it pretty cool. Because after all, right, if we take a look at Shadow, it has an aspect of Solana, and then we take a look at Zebec, that has an aspect of Solana. So yeah, in the grand scheme of things, I just think it makes sense overall in terms of what they're trying to do here. Now, granted, people like to tell me, well, even memes out there of cards, why does this matter? Well, okay, it's not the most revolutionary thing of all time. I mean, having cards at the end of the day, it's nothing that is reinventing the wheel by any means. But actually, I think for what Zebec is doing, considering all the other aspects they're focused on, right? Like, for instance, payrolls, they're focused on global trade and finance. They're focused, in a sense, also on the education market through acquiring something called Science Card UK. I guess, in a way, right? Being focused on education through that. But besides that point, Zebec's focused on a lot of things, even like AI-based PayFi and all this. So when it comes to Zebec, we even take a look at an aspect of RWAs. So really, in the grand scheme of things, it's just kind of one of the other pieces in their puzzle, so to speak. It's not the main thing, but it's one of the components. So I kind of like that when it comes to Zebec overall. I like the diversity, and I like how they're focused on other areas. Now, people like to tell me, though, okay, with all this type of stuff, why is ZBCN still around 32 times lower than 10 cents? Well, good fundamentals, good partnerships, good updates, it doesn't necessarily translate sometimes to the charts, because the charts is more so tied to kind of like the sentiment overall, the selling pressure and all this type of stuff. It's a little bit different than the fundamentals of a project. But the way I take a look at it is this. Cardano, and we take a look at its native token called ADA. Back in 2020, it wasn't really doing much, right? But what was Cardano doing? It kept building, it kept doing things. So eventually, when there was an altcoin season, like what we saw back in 2021, when there was a change in sentiment, we kind of saw what that did. It's like, for instance, if I train for a marathon, if I'm not vlogging it, if I'm not recording it every day, then okay, it's not really going to show. But it's going to show later on when I run a marathon. Now, I'm not an athlete. I'm not going to be winning any sort of records or anything like that. I'm not going to be winning any sort of competitions, but I'm just saying, like, the practice is shown later when there is that marathon, right? The marathon, quote unquote, in this case, I think is like a hypothetical altcoin season. The stuff, it's just like training, basically. It could show later if there is an altcoin season. We'll wait and see. But I think stuff like that sometimes is crucial, because some other projects out there, they don't really do anything. So then let's say when there's an altcoin season, they're a little bit unprepared, because at that point they're like, oh, we're going to announce this, we're going to do that. But sometimes it's a little bit too late in my perspective. So when I take a look at something like Zebec, I like how they're still building and at least doing things when the market isn't necessarily doing the best. Because I highly doubt that the Zebec team wants ZBCN to be like this. You know what I mean? This is just my perspective, right? If I was running a project, why would I want to see the sentiment not be so good? Like, it just make no sense for me. The thing is, when it comes to ZBCN as of right now, like, keep in mind, despite Circle, the creator of USDC, being a pretty large holder, allegedly, when it comes to ZBCN, and also Solana Ventures becoming a backer when it comes to Zebec, even despite all that, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to be affected if there is not such a good sentiment when it comes to altcoins. You know what I mean? Like, even Ethereum is not doing the best, right? We take a look at Cardano's native token and all this type of stuff. They're massive projects. Some of them have pretty big backers, but if the sentiment isn't the best, what could happen? Sometimes the project's just not going to do good. But I think that for me, what's important is seeing a project building and at least doing something when the market isn't necessarily doing the best. So yes, it's around 32 times lower than 10 cents currently when it comes to ZBCN. However, to even hypothetically kind of ever come close to 10 cents, there would need to have the fundamentals to kind of back it up, right? It would need to have the substance. Without good fundamentals, without good partnerships, it's just not really going to have much sort of hypothetical notoriety. So I think when it comes to stuff like this, I think sometimes it's crucial. And also now with the updated tokenomics when it comes to Zebec, I feel like it's going to have a better impact when it comes to the circulating supply. And I even talked about that in one of my previous videos, like in terms of Zebec planning to acquire ZBs and all this type of stuff, hypothetically reducing the current circulating supply. But we'll see how much really impacts Zebec overall. But if there's less volume needed in order to hypothetically attain 10 cents, just because if, let's say, the circulating supply were to reduce, I'm not going to complain about that. Now, in the grand scheme of things as well, like ZBCN as of right now, arguably I would say is number 5, right, in terms of notoriety when it comes to the space of global trade and finance. It's behind Onyx, but Onyx is behind XDC, and then XDC is behind Stellar, and so on, right? But the thing is this, if ZBCN could maintain that sort of position, if let's say going into an altcoin season, would around a $9.7 billion market cap, again, which it would have considering current circulating supply at 10 cents, would that be too much to ask for? Now, when I answer that question, my response is, or should I say my thought process, right, is XLM quite a while back ago, or should I say quite recently actually, but besides that, it had a market cap of around that range. Actually, it was more than that. And that was without an altcoin season. I highly doubt that, 2025 we saw any altcoin season. You know what I mean? But besides that point, the number 2 project quite a while back ago within the space that it's in had a market cap that was bigger than that, and it wasn't even an altcoin season. So what would happen if there was an altcoin season? What could Stellar do and what could this do, right? This is sometimes my thought process. That market cap, I don't know if it seems so ridiculous to me if there was an altcoin season for arguably the number 5 project within the niche that it's in. But this is just my mindset. Zebec isn't even under like 20 or 30 competitors anyways, in my perspective, in its niche. Because if I take a look at the space overall, yes, there's more projects when compared to years ago. There's more memes and all this type of stuff. But if I take a look at the projects in global trade and finance that actually have that notoriety, that actually have the substance, arguably I would say there's only 7 currently. Why do I say that? I think Stellar is number 2, XDC is number 3, right? I think number 4 is XCN, or should I say Onyx, and number 5 is Zebec. Number 6 or number 7, it's like a toss-up between XPR or Swiftcoin. I don't think that's too many. And keep in mind, global trade and finance is a niche that's already kind of proven itself historically, right? It's already kind of been known to be a little bit popular back then. Now, we'll wait and see what happens moving forward, but I'm just saying, it's kind of a proven market. There's not even that many competitors to begin with, and a lot of the new competitors that kind of appeared, they're not within this space, right? They're in other niches, like for instance, AI and all this type of stuff, which Zebec arguably does have an aspect of that through AI-based PayFi, but it's not really kind of directly competing with this. It's like, for instance, a project that's really focused on AI, BitTensor. That's not in the same niche as this, for instance. It's a competitor in the grand scheme of things, but not really within its niche, So yes, there's more competitors overall, but the ones that are actually competing directly, there doesn't seem to be that many, in my perspective. And Zebec, I don't think it's ever going to become like the biggest thing. No, I don't think so. I think it's more so competing against Onyx, right? And if it's only pretty much competing against Onyx, is 10 cents that ridiculous? Because it's just pretty much having one direct competitor. However, nothing I say is financial advice. I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but this is just my thoughts right now when it comes to Zebec. So I want to say thank you for watching, and hopefully you like the audio because I kind of fixed it before. I was trying to test out some audio setting. Yeah, it just wasn't that good. But yeah, let me know if you like the audio better in this video. However, yeah, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a very nice day. It's been Lee the Captain.